two main things here. The first is the character creator itself. The second is the hero mode gameplay. First, I'm going to cover the creator. Now, of course, it's too limited. It needs gender and more races to start with. Next, it needs more slots to make characters. Then, add in the ability to make more than one character for each body size. Also, there needs to be more options for how you can make your character, such as face and upper body clothes and lower body clothes. Just being able to change the head and body is way too limited. Next up is more original choices. There weren't many of these in Ultimate Tenkaichi, but having original hairstyles and clothes makes your characters stand out more and makes them more original, not simply swapping around the existing characters. Also, the addition of an accessory section would be nice. Places to equip things like scouters, Majin seals, halos, etc. The last thing here is there needs to be an option to customize your transformations. This will be based on your base template, no need to pick clothes again and such. The most important thing here would be able to make small changes to accessories, clothing, and hair, meaning your Super Saiyan style, as well as the color. It basically comes down to needing more options and freedom. When making a character, those are the most important things. Now for the gameplay part. First, the story. The story really wasn't that great, but it did create a world with a lot of freedom that would allow you to go fight a bunch of different people, and eventually would have a resolution at the end. So it worked for what was needed, and I didn't expect an award-winning story, so I'll let it pass, though it could use a little work. What I think the story does need is to start off your character weaker. Part of the problem with Hero Mode before was your character had an unbelievable level of strength. Apart from making the mode more interesting, it would help the length and the issue with making the challenge just from making your opponents unfairly strong. Difficulty could scale slower and more reasonably. Now, if you really want to go above and beyond on this mode, have it start with having the player make a choice. I figured this choice would be who they start training under. For example, if you go for Goku, then you would be on the hero path, and if you went for Raditz, you'd be on the villain path. From this split, I would say apart from the different story paths, either completely or slightly, the characters you interact with, fighting styles and moves would all be different. This simply gives the player more to do in the game without it being padding. Quick note on the fighting styles, moves, and such. You would unlock different ones depending on your path, but most of them should still be universal. This brings me to the Masters. This needs a lot of work. I like the system as a whole, but it became so tedious to do all of the training. One of the easiest things to do to fix this would be to not have every training with a master be sparring. This is where the joy of mini-games comes into play. It doesn't even have to be mini-games per se, you could simply add objectives to the battle, such as land supers X number of times, or survive for X seconds. Things like that would make the training more interesting and less repetitive. Here's a little test scenario for you. Now, fair warning here, it is going to cut between a few different games, so it might not mesh perfectly, but hopefully it'll show what I mean. So, let's say you want to train for either the storyline, for a boss, or you just get some experience to level up. So first, you fly to where the training is. For this example, we'll be looking at the gravity chamber. So the first thing you do is pick the level of gravity. This would simply be picking the difficulty of the training. Higher would be harder and give more experience, and yada yada. So after you finish your training, you get your results and then level up. After that, it's back to the world map to do whatever.
Darn it!
You did it!
I will become even stronger!
The last major point here are the levels themselves. It was nice to see a return to a system similar to Budokai 3's with the getting stronger after fights, but the major issue with it was you had no idea when you were going to hit the stat cap at all. Now, I'm not saying the game would have to work like Budokai 3, though I'm certainly not against it, but you need to give players control over their stat growth with the knowledge of how it works so they can plan out how to spend their stat points. For example, still using the Ultimate Tenkaichi system, if the player was told that only 2 stats could get to S, 3 to A, and the other 3 at B, then they could plan out which stats they wanted at S to get them there first. The masters could and should affect how the players level up. Now, I know they already do this, but the effect needs to be made larger, as well as making it clear to the player how it works. Like most aspects on this game, the groundwork is there, it just needs to be built up now. Now, this will probably be my most controversial point, but I think it's one of the biggest flaws, not only with this game, but the last few DBZ games, as well as a bunch of other game series. The problem here is they base the game too much around online and either heavily cut or just remove a bunch of other game features. For example, the customization in Raging Blast 1 really was some of the best in any DBZ game, but there were items that made online unbalanced. The fix? Cut back the customization system in Raging Blast 2 so you can't use as many items and you can't power up your character as much. In Ultimate Tenkaichi, they cut it back to an extreme, and now you can barely equip anything. Also, they removed all the really fun items like the armor. The problem I have here is Raging Blast 2 was on the right track to a fix that wouldn't mean gutting the item system. That was an option to play with items disabled. To me, this is the real solution to a lot of the balance issues with features for online. Simply have options for the features for online instead of cutting them out. Another example of this is how the setups don't carry over for each form anymore. This was added to prevent people from being cheap and equipping items that would only help at the start of the battle, then transforming to use a whole new set with the extra space. Instead of removing this, why not have the option to turn transformations off? A much simpler, less game-ruining way of solving the problem. The best way to handle ranked, though, is to make everything as default as possible. So that would mean a time limit that's not too short, items off, transformations off, and if need be, custom characters off. This would make everyone follow the same rules and have to use their skills and tactics to win instead of just whatever cheap things they can find in the game. I know this would probably make ranked less fun, but the way I view it, if you want fun, you do player matches. If you want to get more serious, you do ranked. The last issue with the online obsession is it seems to me that they cut out other game modes assuming all people care about is online instead of a complete game. Games should be fun first and then get online, not be fun because of online. Things like the mini-games from Budokai 2 and Raging Blast 1 are just gone. And it isn't like you can't have both. The mini-games would be enhanced by online. The most obvious is the use of leaderboards, giving the players another way to compete that isn't just versus. And if you want to go above and beyond, you can make some of these fights online. Imagine an online fight using the score system from Raging Blast 1. You can't kill the other person, you only win if you score more points. And then if you give a penalty to score after you do a certain action enough times, spamming wouldn't work there. So players would need to know what gives the big points and how to get as many points without letting their opponent get any. To sum all of this up, online should just be another game mode and not the main focus. There needs to be other game modes in the game to give the player a complete package. Yeah, this will be my last point. The roster was terrible and incredibly illogical. While a large roster doesn't make the game good, and some characters don't add much to the game as a whole, there really isn't a negative to a large roster. So, clearly, you need to have more characters. So, that wraps it up. My list is the things they could add to Ultimate Tenkaichi to make it better. Or just a general list of things they could add to future DBZ games to make them great.